Welcome to the Nourish Child Podcast, a show about childhood nutrition, feeding kids, and dealing with the ups and downs of growing a healthy child. Here's your host, registered dietitian and childhood nutrition expert, Jill Castle.
Building a healthy habit like regularly exercising or eating healthfully is not easy. And some of the things we've been taught about building habits and changing our behavior doesn't reflect what is known in the research. There's a better way to think about forming habits that are good for you, especially in the eating and exercise department. Today, I have Michelle Segar, a habit and exercise researcher, on the show to talk about her forthcoming book, The Joy Choice: How to Finally Achieve Lasting Changes in Eating and Exercise. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Nourish Child Podcast. I'm Jill Castle, your host, and I'm delighted to have Michelle on the show with us today. She's an award-winning NIH-funded researcher at the University of Michigan with almost 30 years studying how to help people adopt healthy behaviors in ways that can survive the complexity and unpredictability of the real world. Michelle has a doctorate in psychology, a master's in health behavior, health education, and a master's degree in kinesiology from the University of Michigan. And she has combined for her entire career academic research with real-world health coaching to pioneer methods that create sustainable, healthy behavior change. Her first book, No Sweat, is used as a core text in training professionals in health coaching and patient counseling. And her new book, The Joy Choice, which is out in April of 2022 and available for pre-order now, showcases the exciting new science and method for breaking down all or nothing thinking and cultivating in-the-moment decisions that support self-care, health, and well-being. Michelle, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's so great to be here, Jill.
It's really nice to have you on the show. I feel like I've known of you, and I feel like I've known you, but I really haven't known you because we have a mutual friend. My co-author, Marianne, has talked about you for so long, and I'm really excited to have you on the show to talk about your research and what we can learn from you in terms of changing health. So I want to dive into this, especially obviously the parents here are going to be interested in this topic, but so are healthcare professionals, because we're taught about behavior change. I mean, if you're somebody out there who works with clients one-on-one, you know the language of behavior change, but parents might not be familiar with this. So what is behavior change, Michelle?
You know, behavior change is this very global, vague term that it really refers to changing the way we do something. Is it exercising more? Is it eating in healthier ways? Is it going to bed earlier? But I actually think, and while I use the terminology of behavior change because it's what people will understand, I think we need to change how we talk about these phenomenon. And instead of thinking about it as changing our behavior, I believe we would be more effective and successful long-term if we recognized it for what it is. And what it is the choices that we make at any given point, day in and day out. And so by focusing on choices, we're better able to understand what is really needed to stick with the changes we aim for.
Yeah, great. And obviously that's very relevant to the title of your book, The Joy Choice. And we'll get into that in a bit. But just to give people some background, how have we been taught about behavior change that might be leading us down the wrong path?
Sure. We have been taught about behavior change from some ways from science, some ways from just popular thinking that aren't based on science, but that that's our common sense that we go, oh, sure, that makes sense. And we've been given strategies and, told to do this or do that. And really where I've come to in my own career is a deep understanding that even if strategies are based on science and there's research to support that they're, successful in a given study, there are always going to be key assumptions underlining their effectiveness. And that what is below the surface and behind the curtain is not discussed. And the unfortunate part about that is because if we as individuals are trying to adopt a certain strategy, but the assumptions underlying it, which of course we wouldn't know for the most part, or that we're giving our patients, for example, if our patients don't meet the assumptions and the criteria of successful strategy implementation, then it's going to be a lose-lose for everyone. So what we need to start doing is stop just thinking about the strategies and the programs and the approaches and really understand what are these strategies and approaches? What do they necessitate? And actually, do we meet those things?
Right, right. And so when you think about, I'm just trying to theoretically think about an example of, the way we're taught about habits. And there are a lot of, there's a lot of language out there in the media world about, starting habits, and exercise and eating is classic, right? Classic, especially in January. Everybody's, rebooting their diet and starting their exercise programs. And there's all these challenges, 28-day challenges, 90-day challenges. And what you're saying is that below the surface, these challenges and these behavior changes are, great theoretically, but like there's some underpinnings that might be wrong. And so can you elaborate on what some of those might be?
Sure. So I'll throw out two examples, and I'll start with the one that is most straightforward and may not be a surprise to your listeners. And that is SMART goals. So SMART goals are used in every area. If you set SMART goals, you're taught you're going to be set up for success, because of course, if our goals are specific and tailored and realistic and time bound and all those things, how can we not be successful? Mm-hmm. But not only was the SMART goal concept not based on theory, there's actually a lot of research to suggest that, at least in the world of physical activity, it puts us in the wrong path. It puts people who need it most, the inactive people, in a unhelpful direction. So that's one example. That's a less interesting one. I think the more interesting one is actually habit formation. Mm-hmm. It is just about the most popular behavior change strategy that we're currently taught we should aim for, because it will help make our choices automatic, put us on autopilot, no distractions, no temptations. And gee, doesn't that sound good in theory, right? Who doesn't want to offload our temptations and avoid them altogether? Now, I want to be very clear. Habits are awesome. They're great for very simple things like flossing your teeth, putting your keys in the same place. And the reason they're good for simple things is because the way habit formation, again, this is a technical, very specific meaning of habit. So I'm going to take a step back. In society, we use the word habits like we use the word behaviors. And, I believe we can best help our clients and patients and kids when we use terms that are bullseye terms that really hit the nail on the head, and they're not vague, and they're specific to what we need to do to achieve lasting change. And I believe habits is one of those kind of vague global words. Having said that, the specific habit formation is what's researched in the literature, and it's based on the idea that you establish a cue to drive a behavior, and that you get a reward from the behavior, and it's a cycle. Mm-hmm. And you set your cue in order for this cycle to function successfully, in order for you to form an automatic habit. Nothing can change. The context has to be the same. The behavior has to be the same. And, the reward is going to keep rewarding it. But if we take a step back, what are the assumptions underlying that? Well, we can't have any unexpected challenges to the context. And let's just imagine, I'm trying to develop a habit of exercising first thing in the morning before a kid gets up. Mm-hmm. But I have kids that just kind of wake up when they want. Well, that disruption is absolutely going to derail that cycle that we're trying to form. That's just a single example. The other assumption underlying habit formation is that, and this is a big one, and this is how I started the conversation, is that we should be trying to form automatic habits for exercise and healthy eating like these other behaviors. But, let's think about the difference between flossing your teeth. Where does that happen? The context is in the bathroom, often at night. Typically, the kids aren't in there with us, but there's a safe place, if you will, where there's not a lot that's going to disrupt that cycle, the cue behavior reward cycle, flossing in the bathroom. But imagine you're about to go to your exercise class. You've got kids running around. You've got an urgent deadline at work. Well, the context around exercise and healthy eating is so complex that it really doesn't lend itself to habit formation, but people aren't really talking about that out in the real world. I will say that the leading habit researchers are actually grappling with this very issue in the literature, and they're talking about, can we even form habits for complex behaviors like exercise? And so that's an example of how something may sound great on the surface, but once you start digging into the assumptions underlying it and you look at what people's real life context is, you see that the strategies really aren't going to fit most people. They fit some people, but they're not going to fit most people.
Yeah, that's such a great explanation. Two things are like popping into my head. Well, several things are popping into my head, but like, for example, this morning, I've been getting up every morning super early to write. I'm working on a book myself. So, you get into these rhythms and these routines, and I allot myself 2 hours every morning. No problem sticking to that habit. The problem I have is shutting down after 2 hours, especially if I'm in the zone, and then going to do my workout. Cause that's all, that's the thing. I'm like, if I get my 2 hours of writing in, I'm going to go then I do the exercise. Then I get on with the rest of the day. So the whole contextual topic that you're discussing really resonates with me. The other thing that came up for me though is, children. And I am, mother of 4. I've worked with children my entire career, 30 years, similar to your career. And I'm talking frequently with parents about building habits, building routines. And I find myself oftentimes interchanging the word habits with behaviors and with routines. And as you were talking, I was like, the thing is, it's not really necessarily building habits. It's building routines that are sort of go-to and systems. Yes. So, that struck me. And then thirdly, what struck me is that, children are wild cards. They're not the same people as a toddler as they are as a child, as they are as a teenager. So there's this whole temperament thing. There's this whole developmental change thing. And one of the things you discuss in your book is this idea of the habiter and the Unhabiter, I think is the term. And that just cracked me up because you told a story about your husband and I'll let you go ahead and share it, but I totally identify with your husband. I just have to say, but tell us about the habiter and the Unhabiter.
Sure. So, I want to say something that I think is really important, whether I'm speaking to people in healthcare or fitness or wellness or nutrition and dietetics, those of us in the field, especially that has to do with dietetics, nutrition, and fitness, we are all in on whatever this topic is. We chose our careers because of it. So it makes sense that that the issues that our clients and end users and patients might struggle with, we just don't because of who we are and what we value, and we made our careers out of it. So my husband, who is an exercise physiologist, every morning, let me back up. Every night he goes to sleep in his exercise clothes. He's been doing it for decades.
Does he know you're
wakes up.
calling him out on this?
Yeah, he knows. He knows. I have his permission. I would never do it otherwise. He gets his alarm goes off at 5:30 in the morning, rolls out of bed. We have the basement is set up for his exercise, his gym, and he works out. He doesn't have to think. The alarm goes off. He's in his clothes. He just goes downstairs. He's a habiter. And the other, and so, and in contrast, I am not, because if I didn't get enough sleep the night before, there's no way in heck I'm going to wake up early to fit in an exercise that I may really want to do, but I know sleep is more important for me. So habiters in general, there's a personality issue too. Habiters tend to be people who are super disciplined, and the success that Jeff has biking in the morning at 5:30 is a symptom of being a habiter is a very disciplined person who pretty much he achieves all of his daily goals because he's got a tremendous amount of self-control. He's very organized. And so those are traits of habiters. Mm-hmm. Also, to some extent, habiters aren't necessarily in charge of managing the lives of other people, whether it's their families or staff in the office, because once you are managing other people's lives, in addition to your own, that's where the wild cards come in, right? That's where the unanticipated events happen that really can not only derail a habit loop, but really derail and our plans. And so an unhabiter, and I fall into this camp, is someone who is managing lots of life arenas where there are just lots of unexpected things that happen. I have aging parents, one of whom has a chronic illness that, I'm working with my sister to help them make decisions and take care of them and take them to doctor's offices and to stay with them. And I have my work, and I have a 13-year-old son. And so I am managing a lot of things that make it very hard to have my days go according to plan, to not have unexpected needs arise all of a sudden. And so those are some, and I'm comfortable going, I guess I can't do what I hope to do. I'm going to shrink it and do it differently today. Mm-hmm. So there is a big personality element there.
And now a word from our sponsor. Where do vegetables come from? Why is food so colorful? Spring brings along new curiosities and a chance for kids to develop an appreciation for the world around them. There are so many opportunities for learning, and discoveries can really start anywhere, even in the kitchen. This spring, Yummy Crate from KiwiCo invites the entire family to get hands-on with kid-tested and kid-tasted recipes while building kitchen confidence and learning about science along the way. I got to play with the Tasty and Toasty project from Yummy Crate, which focuses on teaching kids about the Maillard reaction, or the chemistry behind flavorful browning. I explored 3 different Diner Delight recipes to teach this concept: hamburgers, chicken nuggets, and smashed potatoes. The Yummy Crate came with a grocery list, recipes, and even a diner menu activity. Yummy Crate delivers high-quality cooking tools and inspiration to build confidence and creativity in the kitchen, no matter your starting point. Start spring with hands-on experimentation in the kitchen with Yummy Crate from KiwiCo. Get 30% off your first month plus free shipping with code NOURISHED at kiwico.com. That's 30% off your first month at kiwico.com, promo code NOURISHED. And I'm sure a lot of parents out there can identify with being unhabiters because, again, you're dealing with lots of daily pressures and things that distract you and take your attention away from the things that you've outlined for yourself. When we talk about creating habits, though, or creating behaviors that promote healthier eating and exercise, because that is really the arenas that your book is focused on, tell us about some of the key elements that you believe need to be in place for behavior changes that last.
Sure. Well, one of the first things we have to do, and by the way, self-awareness is the foundation of a change that can stand the test of time, because it's all about us and our lives. So one of the things we have to understand, or we can learn about, is what at the moment of choice, when it's time, like you were saying, it's, you've got your 2 hours of writing and then it's time to go exercise. At that point, your alarm goes off and it's the point of choice for, you or someone else in that situation may face what I call a trap in thinking, or a trap in your decision. And so your trap could be, oh, this book is just, you're involved in it. You want to finish it. You don't want to stop. This book is more important than me getting that exercise in. So that would fall into the trap of accommodation, which I talk about in the book. But we all have, there's a bunch of classic traps that come to mind, and actually many of them are unconscious, but they are very powerful, and they can tip us in the direction that we actually don't want to go in, because it's a powerful force. So we need to understand, what are those forces? Are you trying to eat in a certain way and you're feeling really resentful about it because your doctor just keeps reminding you that you haven't been able to take off the weight you put on when you had children, and it feels like a should? And, there's nothing that feels better than to kind of think about saying, well, screw this. I am not going to eat that kale salad because I'm going to do this. We rebel, and it's such a powerful voice. But if we're not aware of that internal dynamic is driving us, we're going to fall into that trap. So part of it is truly being able to identify, what are my core traps that I fall into and derail me from making the choice that I had intended and planned to do. That's part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And another part of it is understanding the greater context of our lives while we're trying to make these changes. If you're going back to school and you're trying to get some college credits, whether or not you have little kids running at home, and you're also trying to become vegan or whatever it is, wow, that's a tough context to try to make that change. And so you want to really think about the current context of your greater life, the house you live in, the job you're working in, what's going on in the world. Is this the optimal time to try it? And sometimes it isn't, but people haven't been taught to do an audit, if you will, of their life context and whether it makes sense to start a change that really does reflect core things like what we feed our families and what we choose to eat ourselves. I'm going to take a step back, because ultimately what all of my work is about creating changes that last. Mm-hmm. And that is the symptom. That's like the trophy that we want. I want to put that trophy on my shelf. But guess what? To get that trophy, to achieve that holy grail outcome, we need to make consistent decisions day in and day out, right? And so the real question is, what's going to help us make those consistent decisions? Mm-hmm. And we can make decisions unconsciously, which is what we've been told is what we should be doing, through forming habits, so we don't have to think about them and exert any kind of self-control. We've already talked about a couple of the challenges with forming habits for things like healthy eating and exercise. So if the unconscious automatic autopilot route isn't going to work for us, then what will? Well, the good news is that we have this innate brain self-management system that is set up to help us. But really, until now, no one has taught us how to support it in a way that at this challenging point of choice, we will be able to succeed. It's called executive functioning. And there are 3 specific areas. But in the Joy Choice, I explain the ways in which we've been taught to think about these changes in behavior, and how how researchers are trying to actually help people increase their working memory capacity so they can have more bandwidth when they're at a challenging point of choice, or increase their inhibition, which is an executive function related to what we would call self-control or willpower. But the way they're doing it is by putting people in front of a computer and having them press buttons, not outside in the wilderness of our real life, where we really do need to think about things in the moment when we're stressed out. And so what I did in the Joy Choice is explain the science behind new ways we can actually support our brain self-management system, so that when we're at these challenging points of choice, like you might be at the end of your work before you go exercise, so that we will be able to make the choice that we're hoping for. So it's simplify. We need to think about things through using strategies that help us simplify the way we think about it. We want to play with the options that are right in front of us. And we want to ultimately pick the Joy Choice, which is the perfect, imperfect option that lets us do something instead of nothing. And I'm going to go back to you as an example. You're really grooving on your writing and you really don't want to stop, but you also don't want to just give up your exercise. So maybe at that moment, what you do is you pop your 60-minute plan to go to the gym and work out because you want to spend 20 or 30 more minutes on your book. And POP stands for pause, open up your options and play. And it gives you an opportunity to go, okay, what are my alternatives here to still exercise? Well, I could go to the gym for 30 minutes. I could not go to the gym and walk outside for the 15 minutes before I have to go to that appointment. I could ask the family, can we take it's 60 degrees outside. Let's take a walk before dinner as a way to transition our family into spending, this family time together. So there's really unending numbers of alternatives, but we haven't been taught to think of like this.
Yeah. That's so interesting because that's literally how I kind of process, when I'm in a groove, such as today. I was on a very strict timeline. I wanted to get the writing in. I wanted to get my workout in. I wanted to get my shower in. I wanted to prep for this interview. I had like a very strict timeline, and I still hit that moment where I was like, oh, if I just had another hour, I could finish this chapter. I will be done. And that's such a point and I said, no, I'm going to go do my exercise because I can always come back to this later on tonight. After the day is over, if I really wanted to come back to it. And I knew that I would not have time to do the exercise for the rest of the day, just based on all the different things. And I think what I'm hearing you saying is like, there's self-awareness, there's flexibility, and being really able to think outside the box of a habit doesn't have to be like it's an all or nothing. Like if I don't do it this way, I have to give it up entirely.
And that's why I think the term habit can be harmful, because habit is vague. Like if we start using the word choices and options, then we are inherent to the conversation is flexibility. And by the way, flexible thinking is one of our 3 primary executive functions when it comes to sustainable changes with healthy lifestyles. And so we want to set our brain up to be in flexible thinking mode. And, I do that through framing it as play. It is an opportunity to play with the options.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying. We really haven't been told, how do we support flexible thinking? And in fact, many people are saying, you need to be more flexible, don't be rigid. But what we want to do is to want to be flexible, to set ourselves up to desire to be flexible. And that is what the Joy Choice is. It is inherent. It's the inherent openness so that you can choose something imperfect that will still let you do something. We slay the all or nothing dragon with the Joy Choice because something is always better than nothing. It lets us stay the path. And that is what leads to sustainable change. It's the consistency that stays the path. And it doesn't matter if the exercise session one day is 5 minutes or, the lunch you eat, it has a hamburger, even though it was not on your eating plan because it was what was available. It wasn't the whole hamburger. So you figure out how to slice and dice your healthy eating and your exercise goals in the same way we slice and dice parenting and work. Oh, I only have 15 minutes for this. This is all I'm going to do. Oh, I have to do this now. Inherent in our lives is this slicing and dicing. We do it intuitively, we do it unconsciously, but we have not been taught to bring the same slicing and dicing mindset and attitude and flexibility to our lifestyle behaviors.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. As we sort of start to wind down here, I want to sort of ask you a question about parenting and what parents can do to help their children sort of develop these healthful choices and options as they grow up. What advice would you have for parents who are trying to raise kids who eat well, who love to exercise, who are developing these habits because they're children? And that is the innate job of parenting, is to sort of help our children develop these behaviors that support their health along the way.
Well, it's such an important question. And I do some national policy work around behavior change and messaging and communications. And, the whole notion that if your kids are active when they're young, that they'll be active adults. And, it's more likely that active kids will be more active as adults, but really having the family unit learn to value some activity. Having parents model the new way of thinking that I'm suggesting is flexible. Having you say, gosh, I had this 60-minute workout plan, but I was at such a crucial point and I had this deadline this week. And I just knew if I did 30 more or 15 minutes more, it would get me in this area of my life to a better place. And so I didn't do my full hour, but I did my 30 minutes doing something else. Or, you know what? I saved it so that we could walk together after you got home from school. Verbalizing the flexible thinking, this is about trade-offs. We make trade-offs in all these other areas of our life. And so I think we want to model the kids how to make trade-offs and how to think flexibly, but also to talk out loud about why it's important to still try to fit in some of that exercise. I know that I just won't be as patient when it's time for us to regroup as a family if I don't get a 10-minute walk outside. It's not the 45-minute exercise session. So we want to talk about why, and we want to ask our kids questions to see if they're thinking in this way about moving their bodies. Do you notice anything? Like when I ask my son if he wants to, he's 13, we walk outside with me and the dog, and his MO right now is no. But I'm like, you know what? Come out and take a walk. If you want that extra hour screen time, you're going to have to come outside with me. Yes, I do invoke bribing sometimes. I'm sorry about that. But we're walking outside. It's winter in Michigan, but it happens to be a 45-degree sunny day. And I said to him, tell me, doesn't this feel good? And he said, yeah, it does. Yeah. So, there's a tension. You don't want to force your kids to do too much movement because then it turns it into a chore. But there's strategic ways, and what we want them to do, we want to embed the seed of really recognizing the positive feelings that come with physical movement, because guess what? That is just about the biggest driver of lasting change when it comes to physical activity. So helping kids notice the positive experiences from movement. And if they're in a situation where they're playing a sport and they hate it, the bad news is you are not setting your kid up to do that. So their experience moving through whatever activities is really, want to design it to be positive if at all possible.
That's great. I have 4 kids and they're, sort of all grown and flown at this point, but they all played sports, and they all took a hiatus as young adults from their sports. I mean, some of them played in college, some of them just were recreational in high school. But they grew up being very active. And then they went through this slump where they were like, I'm not a rower, I'm not a swimmer anymore, I don't want to do anything. But they all came back to it in a very different fashion. And I think part of it is because I always talk about how it helps me regulate my anxiety. It helps me feel clear in my thinking. It helps me stay organized. And I've always talked about, how it's made me feel. And even as a recent example, my youngest is in college. He's in middle years of his college, and he's kind of, hit a slump of just wanting to, do other things, not sure what he wants to do, but very active as a young high school kid. And I said to him, I said, what is missing right now, you think, in your life? What, when you balance your life, think about high school. What did you do with all of your time? And now how is that contrasting to what you do with your time in college, which is vastly different? And he was like, I used to exercise 3 hours a day and I don't do any of that. I said, well, maybe you try to pull some of that back into your life and remember how it used to make you feel. And, he is now, he's like, I'll run for 20 minutes. It's not like a mile, or I'm working my way up, but I feel better. I feel more in control of my life. And I think, that really resonates with me as a mom, you saying, you really need to attach that feeling, how it makes them feel, for it to be lasting. And I think we've lost a little bit of sight of that when we talk about sports and activity and exercise for children.
And if we talk out loud about exercise, it really wrapped up with being overweight and needing to lose weight, I can tell you that modeling, there's reasons, and we don't have time to go into it now, why we absolutely want to disconnect exercise and healthy eating away from trying to lose weight. There are so many reasons, and some of them I talk about in the book, but we ourselves, if we don't have that experience, we can't impart it to our kids. So it goes back to our own self-awareness and the all or nothing thinking. So you just modeled and helped your son understand 20 minutes. It's about the feeling. It's not about, it's not about the watch. It's about how it benefits me and the feeling. And the joy choice is about slaying the all or nothing dragon so that we can be in that flexible mindset mode that research shows is what leads to sustainable change. It's not aiming for perfection. It's not doing it right every time. It's actually doing it wrong a lot of the time because it lets us do what we can do.
Yeah, that's great. Michelle, tell us when your book will be out and how listeners can find your work and tap into the book.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
So they can learn more about my book on my website, which is michellesegar.com. And I'm sure they can see the spelling from this interview. The book is being published at the end of April, but I want to encourage people if these ideas make you curious and you want to learn more about them and how they can help you, I have a pre-order gift set that I'm going to be offering through the publication date at the end of April, where I'm offering a live book club with me for anyone who pre-orders with a workbook to go with that so that we can dive deeper into the issues for you. And if you're not sure, but you'd like to learn a little more, I also, in the next few weeks, or if it's not up by the time this airs, and it should be, I have a quiz that will help you really understand what your core traps have been to sustainability with exercise and eating. And learning more about that will give you a sense if this book is really something that feels like a good fit for you or not.
Do you have a website or a URL for the pre-order and for the quiz?
Yes, everything is on the book page. Actually, the home page can lead you to the book page, but it's just if you go to michellesegar.com and there's a section on books, and the first book is The Joy Choice, or you can get there from the home page too.
Okay, so just go to your website, michellesegar.com, books.
Yes.
Okay. We'll include that link in the show notes also, so people can just click and get right to where they need to be. Michelle, thanks so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. And I think I can't wait for your book to come out. I think a lot of parents and professionals will learn a lot about how to help people make those lasting changes so many of us desire to do.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks for listening to the Nourished Child Podcast, where the #1 goal is to help you grow a nourished child inside and out.